I mean, I'd like Badr to comment on that, because Badr, in your company, you've operated in northern Iraq, and one of the things you've done there is to embed social impact within the DNA of your business model. And I think your experience is a bit different from what Farouk is talking about. Can you shed light on that, please?
Sure, no, thank you. I mean, I'd just like to say, as a general statement, that I think we have a huge opportunity today in the Arab world to really infuse this philosophy of social enterprise into our businesses. Now, the SME sector in any developed economy in the world, actually in most developed economies of the world, makes up about 70% of the whole economy. Now, in the Arab world, the average is still 15%. We also know, of course, that the SME space is responsible for employing about 70% of the global workforce. And so with the impending crisis we have in the Arab world related to job creation, having to create 100 million jobs over the next 20 years, which is more than we created in the last century, I think an opportunity to engage the SME space through social enterprise to deal with some of the biggest social problems we have going forward, I think is a huge opportunity. I know everybody on this panel is doing it in some shape or form, and I'm sure many of the audience. Now, I disagree with my friend Farouk in that it's not possible to do both. I understand that there are different ways to define social enterprise, but the way I do is really reorganizing our marketplace of ideas and egos in order to reconcile our interests with our responsibilities. So it's really repackaging capitalism. It's a creative capitalism. It's looking at our businesses and defining them as being successful not because of their financial gain or profit, but also for their social impact, as well as, where possible, environmental impact. So it's really the triple bottom line, or the three Ps: profit, planet, and people. And every industry, bar none, has an opportunity to do this. There are some excellent examples of prominent industries, especially in the financial sector, with microfinance, etc. does. But I think every industry does. Now, one of my businesses under the Crescent Group is Crescent Petroleum. Not many people would associate the petroleum business as being a socially responsible business. But one example you mentioned now is a project which we have in the northern Iraq, in the Kurdistan region, where the objective was really to produce gas for power generation. Now, for people who don't know the region, there's about 5 million Iraqis living there who had virtually no access to power or services because they were neglected during the Saddam Hussein era. So the way in which we modeled the entry into the territory was to really prioritize gas for power generation. Now, the region was, in 2007, when we entered, had very little financial capacity to actually pay for that. So we actually created the first 300 million cubic feet of gas, the first chunk of gas production for free to the region, on the basis that we would recover that longer term through liquid sales, as well as the gas which the region would then be able to afford once it was moving, once the machine was moving, and once there was other investments being made and the creation of industry. Now, what that shows you is sometimes you do need to look at a longer term horizon for your investment, no doubt. But if your business models really satisfies the base of the economic pyramid, then you'll find that your business models end up being a lot more sustainable, scalable, and robust to short-term fluctuations, be it political fluctuations, economic fluctuations. And this example, as a result, led to not only 4 million people getting electricity in 1 year, 24-hour electricity, but also saving the government $3 billion a year in money that they would need to spend in subsidies towards diesel to subsidize as a result of lack of gas. So every industry has a potential, and we have many industries, I think, in the Arab world today which are not being structured or used with that mindset.
Badr, I want to ask you, so we're talking about reclaiming entrepreneurship, we're talking about solving local problems, while locally we have trademark. But one thing is, the Arab world today is passing through a recession. It could be, look at the social recession or economic recession, but we are at a hard time. And it has been widely acknowledged in the US, for example, that at times of recession is where winners emerge, winners can start working on that. Do you think we can draw an analogy here, and do you think the youth of the Arab world should be empowered and feel encouraged to create the next winners of tomorrow?
Look, I mean, at times of what Warren Buffett called irrational exuberance, it's always difficult with the excitement and the adrenaline momentum that's going on to try and figure out what might be wrong, because everything seems to be going right. So a time of reflection is usually when things aren't going so well. We've obviously passed through some difficult years, potentially difficult years to come as well. I think there is huge opportunity to relook at some of what's going on now. I want to bring up the example and the importance of good corporate governance. This is something which is critical. Today, in the Arab world and in the world altogether, you know, the black box model of businesses with information going one way simply is not sustainable and doesn't work. What also we know is even in the most developed economies, rules alone will not mandate, will not lead to the right practices. As we've seen, some of the biggest failures in some of the most developed economies in the world in recent years came from bad governance within systems and legal systems which were actually very good. So what I think it's critically important to do is to, as the private sector, not try and, is to realize that the private sector is primarily motivated by incentive. So what's critically important as we recover from a recession is to realize the value gains and the incentive behind adopting good governance practices. What I mean by good governance, I mean, of course, transparency, accountability, anti-corruption, and this is absolutely critical. An initiative which I launched 3 years ago in partnership with the United Nations Office of Partnerships is called the Pearl Initiative. And that's exactly that. It's a private sector initiative for the private sector, by the private sector, working with business leaders, men and women across the Arab world, to realize and identify the value gains in adopting these models. If we don't do that, it's not going to happen. People will pay lip service to it, and as soon as there's an incentive in another direction, it's followed. And time again, you've proven this. So I do think there are huge opportunities to relook at, like I said before, not just the fabric of our business models, but the way in which we see the whole ecosystem of doing business in the region. And I think corporate governance and everything that entails is something critical if we really are going to be part of a global environment with access to global markets and, of course, interest from the international investor community as well.
So the private sector has to reinvent itself, more or less, in some ways or forms?
I think the private sector needs to reinvent itself. I think in an area of the region where you have, of course, the government sector is overly relied on to solve some of the major challenges which we're faced with. The private sector needs to reinvent itself as a huge potential driver for, dealing with some of the biggest social problems which we face. In partnerships with the government is critical and something which I don't think is happening enough in this part of the world. As I really think it's a good moment to, as Al-Akh Abdul Latif said, we need to start developing and exporting our ambassadors, our entrepreneurial ambassadors, our business heroes of the Arab world, within the UAE and elsewhere. If you go to a high school kid or student in the UAE and you ask them to list 5 of their business heroes globally, they'll come up with names from Warren Buffett to Bill Gates to Steve Jobs, too many. You ask them to name 5 of their heroes in the cultural space. They'll name everyone from Brad Pitt to whoever you want. Do the vice versa. Go to a high school kid of the same age with access to the same opportunities, the same internet, and ask them in America to name the same from the Arab world. You'll struggle to find one. Some might know Fadi Ghandour, that's about it. But really, and so this is a huge opportunity. We need to develop, export our champions. And really, they can be our most effective ambassadors. I think the cultural space and arts and culture, I know it's not relevant to this particular panel, but I think is again an area of opportunity which we're not embracing. We need to get those people out there, including our brands. Unfortunately, you walk in many of the streets of some of the biggest cities in the world, and you will struggle to find a successful global Arab brand. I mean, Dubai really has been a great example at being able to do that with a few names such as Emirates Airlines, which is known globally now, DP World, Jumeirah as a group, but few and far between, to be honest. What about our products, our consumer products, in the realm of technology, even in film and music? So this is really a sector which I think we can do that. So I think our entrepreneurs need to start thinking globally. No longer should we be thinking within the realm of our borders. We need to start thinking globally, utilizing our products and services to really represent what the Arab world can mean to a global network. I think it's critical. Look, I think what's critical to everything and anything that we do, be it in the business world or others, is that it comes from a place of passion. And if you don't have that, you're not going to do it well. And so finding your passion is something critical. When you do that, and in parallel with doing that, it's really thinking of a stakeholder approach. And that comes with really compassion. You know, the golden rule, do unto others as you want it unto yourself. When you're developing a product or a service, think how really it's going to affect not just your pocket, but all your stakeholders. And that's, I think, critical.